I'm so excited about today's topic and guest. The topic is around barn management and running a professional program. Our guest is none other than Alex O'Neal, and he runs an incredibly successful, kind of like well oiled machine of a program himself. So he's the perfect person to be speaking to. But as far as the topic goes, this is Kinsey and I speak to coaches all the time from all over the country, and what we hear from nearly every one of them is just like, I'm figuring this out kind of in the dark, like on my own. And so Alex is here to kind of turn on the lights for us a bit, to tell us what
Thanks
he's
for having
learned
me.
the hard way in some cases, and just from being around other professionals and learning from his own mentors and whatnot. But to start, Alex, thanks so much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So we will talk a bit about your program, but maybe would you mind just giving us context about you as a rider and your business at the moment? So what it kind of entails today?
Sure. So, my wife and I run our barn. So, we've got 40 acres down here. Well, we've got 20, and then we've got kind of 40 total. But we do everything. We've got kind of a small sales business. We do some breeding. We've got some competition horses. We've got some boarders. And it's kind of this wide web of things. And what's been kind of interesting is there's a real kind of art to managing it all. And inevitably, if one thing gets too big, it starts to encroach on another thing. And the key is to kind of create this equilibrium where you can kind of do everything well, but also have kind of a realistic goal for what you're trying to accomplish, basically, and know that, more isn't always better. There's a sweet spot in some areas, and some things are easier to grow than others, but they're not going to benefit you in the long run. So, anyway, we've got, probably 40 or so horses on the farm between young horses, ones we've bred, horses in training, competition horses. We've got a little bit of everything, and we've tried it many different ways. And I think I definitely know now kind of what our sweet spots are. And I know, this year kind of where we need to improve and in what direction we need to go, but you can't always control which part grows over others. So it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about for me, especially right now.
That's awesome. Tell us what your guys' business goal is. Like, is the because you mentioned like you have to keep in mind what the goal is. Is it profit driven, like the higher the better, or is there a riding goal
So
for you or both of
it's
you?
a little bit of both. So Ellie's ridden at the 5-star level a couple times and competed overseas. I've ridden at the 4-star level. I've got a couple horses now that I think could take that step in the next year or two up to 5-star. So I would say the first thing is kind of gearing things toward being able to ride at that level. But then below that is, every horse on this farm needs to be a part of a program that's either contributing to us competing at that level or funding the horses that are competing at that level. And we have a family too. So, and maybe that is kind of the top thing is we need to, be able to pay for our way of living and stuff like that. But it's an interesting thing because you realize that when you're younger and you're starting, you're kind of desperate and take on a bunch of different things and you'll say yes to everything. But then you get to a point where you get older, you can't get hurt as much. That's something I've dealt with recently. But two, like we have little kids. So it kind of puts into perspective, okay, this is, a paycheck or training board every month, but what's my goal with that? And can I find another way to do that that's maybe a little bit smarter, a little less wear on yourself or on the property? I mean, that's the other thing is this is all kind of it's either an asset or a liability. It's either making you money or it's costing you money. So you kind of have to put things into these categories and just look at it and figure out where is this going and what is the point and do I really need to do this or is it necessary? And then you can weed a lot of the stuff out. So that would to answer your question, we both have ambition to ride at that level and create a sustainable way to do it. So that would maybe be the first thing, and then we've got our family, and we've got to kind of make all the other things below that gravitate towards funding this whole operation and thing and keeping it going. And then, making money is kind of a part of that. So it all ties into the end goal the same, but there's just a lot of different ways of getting there.
It takes so much strategy and thoughtfulness, more so than a regular business, for lack of a better word, because a regular business really is, how do we maximize profit
Right.
without doing
Right.
harm and whatnot. But like you just mentioned, your like profit is a part of it, but also like, where are the horses who are coming up over the next 2, 5, 10 years for us in our
Right.
own athletic pursuits, and not getting hurt and not wearing the farm down. It's incredibly dynamic. Tell me, just before we jump into kind of more of the questions, and I got a lot of questions ahead of time too that I'll throw to you, but tell me your like background, like where did you grow up, and were you exposed to high level programs
Yep.
prior to being down in Florida?
Sure. So I grew up in Wayne, Illinois, which is like 30 to 40 minutes outside Chicago, and there was a big horse show facility called Lamplight, like 5 minutes from where I grew up, and they did everything from kind of A-rated hunter jumper shows, dressage, and at the time when I was a kid, they ran Maui Jim and Wayne DuPage, so it would have been the 3-star level then, so 4 short now. But that was kind of my exposure early on when I was a kid to kind of high level horse showing. And then I met John Halling when I was probably 14 or 15. And then I worked for him from when I was 17 to 19 and moved down here and kind of got a sense for what the horse industry actually entails outside of kind of small town, teaching riding lessons at 8 o'clock at night and being miserable. And to me, that wasn't something I was ever interested in, but coming down here and seeing a different side of it definitely opened my eyes to that. And I really had no interest in doing any of this until I came down here and saw it done differently. So I worked for him for 2 years, and then I worked for a lady named Denise Raff for like 3 or 4 years, and rode a lot of sale horses and competed and did a little bit of everything there. And then I worked for Clayton Fredericks for 2 years, I think, and competed his sale horses and things like that. And then I started my own thing with Ellie, and that was kind of building while I was at Clayton's. And it kind of got to the point where we had the same amount of horses, like the ones he kind of had 6 or 7, and I had 6, 7, and then I kept getting more, and it just kind of was a natural thing that I kind of graduated on from that, and started my own thing. But that was kind of the last person I really worked for, and my last kind of influence in terms of the barns that I had seen run by high level people. That would have been the kind of most recent one to when I started doing it on my own.
Is Illinois, what were you area? It wasn't area 4, was it?
4. Yep.
Okay, we were area 4 too. So my sister and I were Minnesota.
Okay.
And but we were kind of, the other side of it. And similarly, like we started spending our summers in Virginia at Eric Dirks and Sarah Cosmplix.
Yeah.
And the first time we like put our feet on the ground at that farm, it was like nothing we'd ever seen. No part of it was like anything we'd ever seen.
Yeah, it was very foreign to me. It was really, really interesting. Like I really couldn't believe it at the time.
And you worked for some really great people at some great farms first, which is awesome, because I think a lot of people around the country are like, maybe they've been in area 4 for their whole lives, and that's where they're building their business, and so they haven't really been like in the day in and day out of a farm that's either in Ocala or Virginia or wherever it is that has kind of more of a well-oiled machine already happening. So that's very cool that you got to work with those people and that's where you grew up. Tell me now, at the farm that you and Ellie have, what are the roles that you have that exist at the barn? So the roles of the people who are working on your team.
Sure. Okay. So it's me. We've got a pretty broad. There's a lot of people here, so I'll kind of go through. I'll go through all of them.
Okay.
So you've got Ellie and I kind of running the show, but in different ways. So we've got, to me, kind of two different management positions, and that I kind of keep everything on the property ticking along and things like that. Um, so that's like, fencing, things that need to get repaired, that side of things. And then I've got a guy that helps me that I kind of manage in terms of doing all that, like fencing, mowing, all the normal kind of farm stuff that would exist without horses on it at all. And then I can kind of, in a sense, like prioritize what needs to get done because it is a horse farm. Like, if the grass is a little long one day, you're probably going to get away with that. But if there's a bunch of broken fencing or holes, or I kind of look at it from that perspective, and then I have somebody kind of helping me check the boxes. Um, and then I've got another girl named Amber that is like a barn manager that kind of goes over appointments with me and can kind of keep things running so that if I'm at a show for 4 or 5 days in a week, which is pretty normal here because the levels get split and you end up showing uh, quite often, basically. But that way things can keep going if I'm not here, and she can be in charge of that. And then Ellie would kind of take on the role of the horse care side of it in terms of managing the feed room, farrier appointments, and she would share that with our head groom, Anna Robinson. So between the two of them, they would kind of make um, a plan for, you know, what the horses are, not even what they're doing during the week, but they would kind of take charge of the feed and ordering stuff and things like that. And then I would kind of do more property stuff. And then in terms of the scheduling for what the horses are actually doing, Ellie and I would do that together Monday of every week. And it would always work back from the weekend. So if they're showing, you kind of have X amount of boxes you need to tick, whether it's, run through a test, take them show jumping somewhere, cross country school them. Ellie and I would do that together, and then kind of build out from big events like getting the horse's feet done. So it's a lot of Ellie and I kind of doing stuff together, but then we kind of break out and I kind of go, okay, what needs to get done on the farm to keep this all running? And Ellie would go, okay, we need to order this for the horses or that, or, this vet's coming this day, this physio is coming this day. So we kind of split the roles into that. And they do overlap. Like we're always going to pick up the other one's job if they're not here, but we've kind of found that that works best. And then we kind of have two people underneath us that will kind of back us up in doing that. But we kind of lead the groups in that way. And then we've got another girl named Finley Hobanick that's been with us for years. And her and Ellie and Anna would all be, kind of on the same team, and they all know what's going on. But at any given time, they know, what the horses eat, what they look like, what their legs look like. And I do too, but they would kind of be in charge of doing it every day and keeping, kind of notes on exactly what things look like if I'm not there doing something else or whatever.
Yeah. So you have barn manager, head groom, and then kind of like barn staff.
Barn staff. Yeah. And I would say like Finley started as a working student. She
Oh, cool.
is an employee now, but has been with us a long time and is so good at everything. I mean, you could give her most of those jobs and feel pretty confident that she could knock it out.
Yeah.
So we're lucky. We've got a good group of people.
So having learned from the other barns that you've been at, and I'm sure in your own operation, and landed on this structure of employees, what what makes this work? Like, are you dividing roles very like clearly? So in terms of like the head groom will never do X, Y, or Z because that falls in someone else's jurisdiction? Or are you creating a culture of like everyone knows what needs to be done and there's so many moving pieces that you're expected to pick up the slack? Or basically tell me like not the mistakes that led you to this spot, but like the learnings that led you to these employees and any policies kind of that you have in place that make it work well with
Sure.
the
So
staff.
I think the first thing is that everybody is delegated different things to do, knowing that Ellie and I are kind of at the top of either side. So if we're in the barn and things are quiet or we're there, I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is if we're there, which we aren't always there. We also have 2 little kids, so that's another thing you can throw into this that'll just totally blow it apart. Because there are some days when you have 10 things to do and you have to do that, which is not have to, but you should be, and we like doing that. Um, so the big thing is that we're kind of all working together, but we all know what who has each role, and then you kind of divide that up throughout the weeks so that it's all split up equally. And then if one person has too much to do, you've always got somebody that can kind of cover, that knows how to do that part of the job. Like, for example, we were at Terra Nova last week and there was fencing getting done, there was a plumber here, and there were all these things going on. And I was thinking, I'm leaving and I've got all these appointments. But then, you know, I was thinking, there's no way this is getting done while I'm gone, even though it really can't go on any longer without getting done. But then the girl that works for us, Amber, that is the barn manager, was taking care of the horses and kind of looking after doing some of the roles that Anna would do, who was with us. But then, you know, other than feeding and kind of making sure everybody's happy and healthy, there's time for her to do these things. And,
Yeah.
you know, you communicate it in advance. And that's the biggest thing is communication. And I'm all about like just going out in the morning and getting on a horse and riding. I would love to not speak to anybody. I'm not
Yeah.
great at it, but it is the key to everything. Like if you have people around you that want to help and know what to do, you've got to talk to them and you've got to give them a heads up and kind of, even if it doesn't seem like it's worth saying, you have to talk it through because nothing gets done without teamwork and communication. And if you have the right people, you know, you can all kind of work together and get a lot done that is seemingly impossible. And I think I would have been probably the best example for somebody that goes out and, you know, has 10 too many things to do and then just keeps adding things. And then it's the end of
Yeah.
the day. And I'm like, there's just no way. I mean, I love to
Yep.
say yes to everything, but it's just not possible.
Totally.
So you kind of have to, you have to delegate. I mean, that's the biggest thing.
Yes. So to say back to you, just how it's working, you and Ellie basically split, divide and conquer horse care to Ellie and property management to you, and then you both
Yep,
have a second in command on those two themes.
exactly.
And then you have Finley, who is barn staff and can kind of help with anything and
Right.
keep everything moving forward, um, amongst everything going on. And tell me, if communication is the most important thing to make all of this happen and make things run smoothly, do you have any tips for people who are running a barn to just anything communication wise? Tell us, give us your
I
advice.
think you gotta I think you gotta write stuff down. And I think even if you don't have a scheduled like sit down meeting, which we don't do that often, but like I think I'll get home at the end of the day and kind of have thoughts pop in my head. And I honestly, a lot of times I feel like I don't have time to stop and sit down and kind of explain what I'm thinking because then I know something that should take a minute or two will turn into like a 20-minute conversation. And I know that I need to have that conversation, but I cannot get my head around stopping for X amount of time because that'll just throw everything off. So a lot of times I'll write stuff down on my phone or I'll get to the end of the day and write it down in like the planner that I have for what the horses are doing and lessons and billing and stuff like that. But you got to make notes and you got to keep them kind of going all the time because then you can come out the day after or even at the end of the day, you can send a text and say, hey, I was thinking about this today, you know, whatever. But it's just that organization of like just writing stuff down, not forgetting, because the day goes on, you get distracted. At least I do. And I know that there's a lot that I'm kind of willing to overlook in the moment that I really need to kind of get out and get ahead of before it becomes a
Mhm.
problem. And that's one thing that helps me because I love to just get out and ride, 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 ride. But that's,
Yes.
you know, the easiest and most kind of not necessary part of all this. Like riding horses is easy. It's the managing that will really get you in trouble. That's for sure. I mean, there's just no way around it.
Yeah. Write it down is really good advice and put it in a text, and even like avoiding the unnecessary 20-minute conversations is kind of like their relationship building is an important part, but there's an efficiency that's necessary to run a farm too, and not
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
warrants a 20-minute conversation.
No,
So
I think and like Ellie be very different than me in that she like I go out to the barn every morning and unless I have like okay I'm meeting this person unless I have something scheduled, all I want to do is go and start riding and feel like I've got time to do that part really well. And I'll kind of start with the bigger, 4-star advanced horses and work my way down. And
yep,
then I'll put the client horses kind of toward the end, or I'll try to teach at the end. But all like what makes me feel really good is going out and starting, knowing that my time is on my side. I've got time to do it. And I don't really want to talk to anybody. And it's not that I'm unfriendly. I'll talk to anybody about anything, but I feel way better going out and getting started. And then I can deal with all the other stuff later. Ellie would be the opposite. Ellie wants to go in the barn and look at, you know, talk to the girls, see what's going on, look at the board, see what we need to order and stuff like that. But she is doing more of that than I am.
mhm,
But then I think she feels like she can't get started riding until she knows where everybody's at and what needs to
yeah,
get done. And, like the organizational side of it is good. And then she'll get started. Whereas I'm like, I will do that later because I can always do it over the phone or, I can, worst case, I can push it to later in the day and I can go get my kids and come back or but it's just two different ways of operating. Like it is kind of funny because we want the same thing, but our ways of getting there are quite different.
yeah.
Um, and that's kind of something we both just like turned, we've developed into that. Like it wasn't something that, yeah, it's just funny how it's worked out.
It's what you found works for you and your days.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it my sister and I just read a book. I think it's called The Great CEO Within or something like that. And this guy's advice was block the first 2 hours of your day for top goal time, which sounds like
Right.
both you and Ellie are doing that. Like it's your most productive uninterrupted time of your day. So like what do you need to put there? And I
Right.
mean, what we took away from it is like do not be spending that time checking your emails and whatnot because that's just mindless. It's
Right.
not moving you
Right.
toward what you're actually trying to do. But what you and Ellie are both doing is during that time is intentional and it is moving you toward what you're trying to do,
Right.
even though it's a different activity for both of you.
Totally.
Um,
And I think I heard, I've always kind of thought that like in the morning, I really just want to get the riding side of whatever I'm pursuing with my riding or whatever, or
mhm,
even with horses I have for sale. Like I want to get those boxes checked early in the day when I know it might not take me an hour to ride one horse, but I have it if I need it. Maybe it's 20 or 30 minutes or whatever, but I want to feel not rushed. And that's
yeah,
the only way I feel like I have it is to start early and not that I'm ignoring anything that's going on in the barn. Like if there's something that needs to get dealt with, I'm happy to do it. But I want to,
yep,
you know, make the biggest block of my time available for that. And I heard I don't know what I was watching, but a couple years ago there was a interview with that Boyd did with somebody, and he had said how I think it was Eric Devander had come in and said, okay, you get to the barn, it's just chaos, and there's this going on, that going on, it's just wild. And he said, 7 to 11:30 is whether it was high performance time or I can't remember how he put it, but
hmm,
he was like, you're going to ride your horses that are trying to accomplish these goals in that time, and that's all you're going to think about. And I think that was a kind of a way that was something I needed to hear. And I'm doing nowhere near what Boyd's doing. I'm not saying that. It's very different, but there needs to be time that you set aside for what you're doing. And you have to have people around you that understand that you're not trying to be rude, you're not trying to blow them off, but you need that time because at the end of the day, like if you're going and doing this at a high level and you're not ready, it's dangerous. You're going to get
yeah,
hurt. That's the
right.
first thing. And then your goal is obviously to be competitive, but I think if you prepare right, then that'll come. But that's something, especially now that I have kids, I'm like, there's just you can't skip this stuff. Like
Totally.
it's an extreme sport. I mean, there's no way around it.
Yes. Um, it makes perfect sense. And the nature of, I mean, just what you described at the beginning of this call, all of the different things that you guys have going on, you will be pulled in 100 different directions if you don't protect your time,
Right.
inevitably. So
And I
that
mean,
will
that's the
happen
one.
later.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing you don't
Yeah.
get back. Like, there's
Yes.
only so much of it.
Tell me how you either find, get the right people on your team at your barn, and or manage them in a way that makes it a successful team.
So I think the first thing is just being really clear about the role you want the person to fill when you interview them, and not kind of go, well, I really like this person and I don't think this is what they really want to do, but it might be the best option I have for now, and kind of compromising on that. Um, and we've had some people we really liked that maybe weren't great at the roles we wanted them to be in. And eventually it fizzles out and it doesn't work and it's not that big of a deal. But I think that, not to say don't hire your friends. I'm not saying that, because I think there is a way that that works. But I think you just have to be very objective and go, this is what needs to happen for whoever's doing this role. And this is what's happening. And they're either lining up 80 or 90%, or they aren't. And the problem is, your results and the way the horses look and all that stuff is going to be take the negative effect. And you kind of can't be afraid to rock the boat and change it up when it's not working. Um,
Mhm.
and also don't live in delusion. Like, if things are going on for months and months and you're like, I can't figure this out, what is going on, then you need to make a change. And it's not personal, it's just part of running the show. That's just kind of how it needs to go. And again, that's
Yes.
something that everybody kind of has to learn how to do. Like, I
Mhm.
like getting along with everybody, and I can kind of make it make more sense in my head than maybe it does on paper. And I used to kind of let it go and think, okay, well, who else am I going to get to do this? It's not going that bad. And eventually you're like, well, it's not going that well, because I'm thinking about it every day. And then it's taking
Right?
a toll
Yeah.
on you. And so you just got to be objective about it. And in the normal business world, if you aren't doing your job or you're not good at it, you don't have that job anymore, whether you quit or you get fired. It's like,
Yeah.
in horses, it's hard to find good help. I think that's the problem. I think that's probably the easiest answer, is you got to just kind of stick it out and find the right people. And you might not find them the first couple of tries, but when you do, you got to make sure you keep them around and know how to do that.
Do you think part of finding the right people is having a reputation for being a good place to work, or what
Yeah,
attracts the right,
absolutely.
or having good results, or is it everything?
I think it's everything. I think you got to have kind of a good track record. And, I think a lot of people, I think you got to treat people well, regardless of who they are. And I think, there's some really good riders that I, can think of that I wouldn't want to work for. And it doesn't mean I don't respect what they do or what they know, but, you just gotta, I think you gotta kind of, yeah, I think you gotta just be good to people. I think that's the first thing, and not be so obsessed with what you're trying to do that you take it out on other people. I think I see a lot of that. Like, there's a lot of projecting of like, you know, I work so hard at this, and why is this not better? Well, it must be your fault. It's like, nah, everybody works hard at this. You're no different. Like,
Hmm.
there's a chink in the armor somewhere. Like, you got to figure out where that is needs to get fixed, and then you can go from there.
On that note, to kind of speak to the other side of the table here, like people who are working at a rider's farm, like, what are fair expectations? Is it a fair expectation that you're not going to be screamed at, for example? Um, what are fair
Yeah. I mean, I
expectations?
think
Even
I think that's
hours of
fair.
the day?
I think that when it's in the interest of the horse's health, I think the hours thing kind of goes out the window. Like, we're pretty good about saying, that barn hours are 7 to 4:30, unless we're at a show, and then they are what they are. Like, horses need to get braided before the next morning, or if we get in late, we all kind of deal with it together. Um, when Ellie and I don't have our kids, like, we're right there trying to help and do it, or we're organized and we know, okay, we're going to go walk horses. You guys finish up. Like we talk about it and keep an open line with that. But I mean, the getting screamed at thing, like, it's just bullshit. Like, if you, people, I think it's kind of an old school way of doing it. And I feel like the only time I mean, there's certainly people that are lazy and don't do what they're supposed to do. And yeah, you probably are going to get yelled at. But at the end of the day, like, you can't, I just think it's always like communication that needed to happen earlier that happens later. And then there's emotion behind it. People get fired up. And it's like, by the time you're yelling and screaming, you know, I'm not saying I haven't done it. Like, I'm sure I've lost it on somebody, but
Yeah.
I mean, looking at it now, I'm like, well, that's my problem. That's not yours. Like, if I thought this was going to be an issue and it made me so mad, I should have brought it up sooner and dealt
Right.
with it.
Yep.
And everybody's
Yeah.
human. Like, you're going to make mistakes. I'm not saying that,
Yeah.
I've never done it or people aren't going to do it. And if you hear somebody's a yeller, you shouldn't work for them. Like,
Mhm.
maybe you just need to be ready to do a good job,
Ready to
or,
never
or
make a
it, like,
mistake and not be around them if they have a bad round.
yeah, I mean, everybody's going to make mistakes, but like the people that I mean, I've worked for a lot of people and I've certainly gotten yelled at, but not for no good reason. Like, I feel like
Yeah.
I've justifiably gotten screamed at, but looking at it now, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I kind of needed that.
Yeah.
You know, I
So,
also think you got to know who you are. Like, I can handle that. I can get
right.
really chewed out for no reason and be fine. Like, I can, take it when I need it. I can kind of tune it out. That doesn't bother me, but not everybody's like that. If it's going to ruin your life, you need to figure that out before it happens, because that'll really make you stay up at night.
Yeah. Totally. Okay, walk us through your like a typical day in the life for you, and I mean tell me too how much is typical with how many things you have going on in terms of teaching sales horses, your own horses, the
Yep.
farm, etc. I'm sure it's not that typical, but tell me how you kind of manage your time.
Okay. So a normal morning, Ellie and I kind of split driving because our daughter, who's 5, Fiona, goes to school. So one of us would take her to school. So I'd either be with my son and wait for his babysitter. He gets picked up at 8, or she comes here rather. So I'd either get to the barn at like 8:05. Our house is right next to the barn, so that's easy. Or like 9 o'clock if I take Fiona to school, and then just kind of check in with what's going on, say hi to everybody, kind of make, see if anybody needs anything, if there's any weird legs or anything like that. And the nice thing is, like, if I'm coming in at 9, Ellie's been there a little earlier and vice versa. So one of us will kind of get the lowdown on what's going on and then call the other one. So by the time, if you're not the first one there, you kind of know where everything's at before the day starts. Um, and then, there's probably 15 to 20 minutes of seeing what's going on and then start riding. So let's say 9:30 to 1 or 2 would kind of be normal for me now. And then I would teach lessons for 2 or 3 hours, depending on the day. And I would kind of mix my riding, like the competition horses, in with the sale horses. I do the big ones first, put a sale horse in. If I'm teaching on the flat, I can kind of get away with flatting around while I'm teaching, which is helpful. And I am trying to kind of shift it to where I'm doing more sale horses to get the riding kind of time up and the lessons down a little bit, because I feel like I've been getting pulled in a little bit of kind of a couple different directions where the riding is maybe a little less than it needs to be, especially kind of going into the spring where there's some more stuff to do now and a little bit more pressure to be ready. But that would kind of be a normal day. And then we'd kind of wrap up at 4, and I'd go either get Fiona again or Angus or whoever needs to get picked up. And then we might go back to the barn and, help organize stuff or whatever. Or if we're, good for the day and everybody's turning out and feeding, then that's kind of it. But that would be kind of a normal day for what we have going on right now.
Yeah. Your children's names are adorable. Fiona and Angus are the cutest names I've ever heard.
It's funny saying them out loud to somebody that's never heard of them, because they're very fairy tale-y and cute, but
They, they
they're good little
are.
kids.
I had my first kid this year, and it has made me so hypersensitive to names, or not hypersensitive, but like
Yeah,
hyper
no, you
aware, because I
right,
just,
right.
like toiled over names forever. Um, okay, that, not to take us totally off track.
No, you're fine.
That is paints a good picture though of what you guys have going on a day-to-day basis. Tell me, do you have, like, if someone were to ask you, like, what has been a game-changing X, Y, and Z? So it could be anything, like a game-changing tool you're using, a game-changing process that you put in place, a game-changing approach to the business. Like, even if you're like having a lot more sales horses versus a lot more lessons has really changed for us. Whatever it is, does anything come to mind in that regard?
I think figuring out what kind of, so I've got two answers. So one is like in terms of keeping the horses organized. I think, and this is going to sound pretty basic, but kind of working backward from your goal. Like if I want to go to, Bromont in June, when do I need to start galloping? How many runs do I need? How much, what are the horses' weak areas? Like show jumping, dressage, whatever. If it's me, it's always dressage, because I suck at it. So anyway, but
It's
like
their weak area.
starting, months in advance and going, okay, this is what I need to do. And then kind of adding on some additional things like, okay, I'm going to put 2 runs in on this plan that I can utilize if I need them. And if I don't, I'm good. And I'm going to start galloping here. And then when it throws a shoe, I'm prepared to do, still do the events.
Yep.
And I think you kind of have to over plan, and then you can cut as you go, but starting early and doing stuff like that. And then the other thing would be, and to me, I was always like, well, I'll do that. I'll do rocking horse. I'll do the intermediate here and see how that goes. And whether I'm too laid back about it, or like Ellie's just kind of changed me into being more organized, because she would be very much that way. Like she would go, like I'm saying, like she'd be super organized months out and have a
Yeah.
plan and know what she's doing. And I'd be like, oh yeah, we'll see where we're at. And that really doesn't work, because you're always behind if you're never kind of looking ahead, which I feel like I dealt with for a long time. And now I've seen the other side of it. It makes a big difference. And then the other thing I would say would be, just kind of like, even if you make like I've done it for our business where there's like a budget, and seeing where money goes, and how much you spend on staff, what your living expenses are, how much you pay your farrier, like doing that is a big help, and having it out in front of you and just being black and white of like, oh my God, how am I spending that much money on it? And sometimes it's like, well, yeah, you got to buy good hay, you got to buy good grain or whatever, or you got to pay this farrier that does a better job an extra $100. There are some things that you'll see and go, yeah, that makes sense, I need to do that. But then there's other things where it's like, okay, I don't need to, I'm losing money there, or I could buy a load of hay in bulk and cut that down. But then taking that idea, so like a spreadsheet or a budget or whatever, doing it with time and seeing where you're spending your time, because that will kick your ass at some point. Like there's no way around, you don't get it back. There's, and for me, it's like eventing such a weird sport. If you're a pro athlete and just about any other thing, like if you're a pro golfer and you're playing lights out, like if you're Scotty Scheffler or one of these big guys, the better you're playing, the more money you're making.
Mm-hmm.
It's a directly proportionate relationship, to an extent in eventing. If you have 6, advanced horses, and you're going to every big event every weekend and winning prize money, then yeah, you are maybe making more money. But if you're kind of like a mid-level, not even a mid-level rider, but if you have, like Ellie and I, if you have some upper level horses and you go to these big shows, I'm probably only going to run fast at one or two of them, and then maybe at
Mhm.
the 3 day. And so the more I compete and the better I do, the less money I will make, because it's less money I'm spending, or less time I'm spending teaching, riding horses for sale. I'm not there. So in theory, a horse could get tried when I'm away, but it helps to be there and tell them this is what it,
Yeah.
does at the show. And that, you know, there's a lot of value in that. Um, so you have to look at it, like you have to make these charts and kind of see it for yourself and know what you're okay with. Like, I'm not okay with just going and like selling myself to a million people to get more horses to do this and just being on the road and compete like that. That's not what I want. I like the side of it that makes money. I like teaching, within reason. Like, I don't want to be so spread so thin that I feel like I can't ride my horses, which I feel like happens every once in a while. But anyway, you've got to know what works for you. And I think you got to try it a few different ways before you feel kind of confident about how you need to do it.
Yeah. Teaching, I think, is something that a lot of people who are listening because they're wanting to learn about barn management and how to run a business like this probably are doing maybe even more teaching than you, because they're not focused on upper levels. They're focused on
Right.
keeping the lights on from teaching. So
But
do you
and I feel
have
like
any?
anywhere from that's not, if you live in the Midwest or, um, I guess it doesn't really matter. But I mean, eventing predominantly, like, you're going to make most of your money teaching people
Yeah.
how to do it. I mean, that just is the way it is. There's not a whole lot of people that make money riding, like,
Yeah.
at least that I know.
Right.
So
So tell me, when it comes to teaching, what advice do you have for people who are doing that and they aren't, like, the upper level riding or riding in general is not, a big part of their business? Do you have advice in terms of managing clients or policies you put in place with clients or anything regarding teaching?
I think with teaching, it's just all about safety. And I feel like with eventing, I mean, my biggest thing would be 2/3 of it is jumping. And I think people want to be competitive. And what I see is people take a lot of flat lessons and buy these fancy movers. And, we've kind of gone toward that as a sport. And at novice and training level, or even beginner novice, yeah, you kind of win by doing well in the first phase. But, the chances of you falling off and breaking your neck in a 20x40 dressage ring are pretty low. Like, but they're pretty good the minute you go out cross country and jump a set of show jumps or, schooling. I just think, if you're gonna be in this industry as an event trainer, I think you got to look at the safety side first and push people to get all the experience they can jumping and doing that stuff. And you can always improve the flat. I think that's pretty easy. But I think that's kind of it's not your responsibility, because whoever you're teaching has to kind of make the effort to take the lessons and put the time in. But to me, that's like number one. Like, I've got a really great group of amateur clients that board with us and some people that chip in. And if we're going to an event in 2 weeks, it's like, okay, well, you need to cross country school at least once. Maybe, we schedule twice. If the first one's good, you're probably okay. You need to jump twice. Maybe we'll go through the test and do a flat lesson the week before. But it's all safety. Like, you can't not check your boxes. Like, it's hard enough to go win at on the nicest horse at the show, like, without anybody really that exciting there. Like, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot
Yeah.
of things that can go wrong. And, I just think the safety thing, it's a kind of a paramount thing. Like, I can't stress that enough, especially now. Like,
Yeah.
the sport has changed a lot, and we need to keep it around. So we got to keep people from getting hurt.
I hate to admit that was a surprising answer. Like, I wish I would have been like, yeah, duh, safety. I was like, oh wow, we're not talking about like scheduling. Um, that's really interesting. That
Yeah.
makes a
And
lot of
like, put
sense.
pressure on people to, like, and I think it's gotten better. But I remember when I was a kid, like, eventing in kind of a low level barn, trying to go preliminary, it was like you need to work on your test and blah, blah, blah. And maybe that's why
Yeah.
I'm so like, maybe I should have spent more time doing that when I was a kid. Maybe it would have stuck with me, but like, it was always like, maybe you go cross country schooling once at the beginning of the season and then you started showing, so you don't need to go again. And I'm like,
Right.
I cross country school every week and I do
Yeah.
this a lot. So if that's what I'm doing and you've got one horse, you need to like make the most of it, and do
Yeah.
it really, really safely and pick
Yeah.
something that'll take good care of you.
That's a good reminder for trainers and riders and anybody listening who
That's
jumps
another
horses.
that's another thing too, though. Like if you're teaching mostly and not doing as much riding, um, and this is a bit of a tricky one because not everybody can just sell whatever horse they have and go spend a bunch of money on a new horse. But
Yeah.
like when you're talking about getting into this, or you need to be very open to the fact that whatever horse you picked when you weren't sure what you were going to do and now you want to event, your horse doesn't really want to do it or isn't safe. Like when your trainer tells you that, it's not just them trying to make money on a commission finding you a horse. You need to take it seriously and listen. And they, like if you're like a lower level, a nice lower level event horse, let's say it costs like $30,000 to $50,000. $3,000 to $5,000 is not going to change anybody's life. It's money, but people need to listen to their trainers and take them with them to try horses and get their opinion and know who you're buying from. And that to me is like a big thing. Like people need to really wake up and get help. And I've watched so many people go around without any help. And it's like,
Yeah.
like I'll tell you right when you walk in, if you're 5'2" and you're coming to try one of my horses that's 17.2 and pulls and is funny on the trailer, I'm not gonna let you on it. But
Yeah.
that's not everybody. And most of the people I know down here are that way. They're gonna take pretty good care of you and they want it to work out, but there's a lot of people that won't. So you need somebody with you that you trust that can kind of evaluate these things if you're not familiar with it. Because you can get
Yeah.
hurt and that's not
Totally.
fun.
Yeah. Um, it's okay. Just wait 1 second. I'm gonna grab the baby. I warned you about this before we got on. I didn't warn
No,
everyone else. Just
if
wait one
anybody
second.
gets it, it's me. All good.
Okay.
Oh, cute baby.
Thank you.
Who's that?
This is Logan.
Logan.
He's been on one other podcast with John.
Oh, perfect.
So whoever's editing, cut this part out. And I'll let you go soon in just a second, Alex. But I wanted to ask, when we're on the topic of teaching, in terms of like keeping your clients accountable for their invoices and when they booked time with you and like how they show up to your lessons, even whether they're like warmed up or whatnot, is there anything you're doing to set expectations for people or I don't know, just make it run more smoothly? I'm assuming that at your level, you're attracting clients who kind of know what they're doing, but maybe you can remember when you weren't at that level yet and it was more of a shit show. So what do you recommend to people to make that happen better?
That's a really good question. I'm pretty lucky that way. Like I don't have any crazy policies where like if we plan something the day before and then you cancel day of, I charge you half of the lesson rate. If that's happening to you all the time, I mean, I had a pretty bad accident in the fall and I had to get my foot reconstructed and get a joint fused. And so anyway, I was going to PT like 3 times a week. And if I canceled the day of, And they'd always remind me 24 hours in advance. If I canceled the day of, I had to pay half of whatever the session was, which was like $40. And after going there a lot and being pretty sick of it, that kept me going. Like I was, and I needed to go, but when I wanted to be lazy and just sit around or spend, 2 hours of my day doing something else, that was pretty good incentive. But again, with the venting, like if you don't think you need lessons, then you can just cancel on whoever's helping you. You are dead wrong. Like again, it's a safety thing, and it was a, kind of a thing for me in that I knew I needed to take care of myself to keep doing this. But I don't have any crazy things like that. I try to always make sure that I'm done riding by the time I start teaching. Every once in a while, I'll teach a lesson in the middle, or I'll jump a young horse or a sale horse while I'm helping somebody else. I think that's actually quite good. And it's a good way to kind of use your time well. Like if you're on a 5-year-old that needs to jump around a novice level track and you have a client doing the same thing, you can warm up together and kind of let them sit and observe. And I think that's a really good way of doing it. Within reason. I don't think you can, like I'm not going to jump my advanced horse teaching a preliminary lesson. Like at that point, you're taking away from them because you're going to be pushing what you're doing on them. And, or maybe you take it easy that day because you're thinking, well, this other horse maybe shouldn't be doing that. So I'm just going to jump something easy and keep the pressure off. So you got to kind of watch that. But that's a good way of doing it. But yeah, I think it's just, I don't know. I don't have any great advice. I think if you're constantly getting blown off and stuff like that, maybe you need to have, okay, here, now I got it. So I have a boarding contract that has all this stuff laid out, and everybody that comes to train with us, put a horse with us, whatever, there's a release in it. They all agree to it and sign it. And that's the best way to keep things kind of running smoothly, is have it all written out. And then you can go, hey, these are the rules. You didn't show up for your lesson.
Yeah.
I have to bill you anyway. And I have a notebook where I keep track of lessons. So that would be kind of how I do that. But yeah.
You took us full circle on the value of writing things down and having things in writing.
Yeah,
we started there
down.
And we're ending there. That's awesome. And I'm so appreciative to you. I mean, even just throughout this conversation, it's clear, how many other things you could be doing right now. And I'm so appreciative to you for spending time with us and giving us a glimpse into your program and how it works. And I'm sure people will find it really helpful. I know the people we talk to are just so like hungry to hear from somebody and just candidly learn how it all works, and not
and
be
I
just
think,
alone.
I think too, like everybody that I know that I look up to in this, I talk to them all the time and I ask questions, and like they're more than happy to share, and it's not even like you got to go get dinner with them and say, hey, I need to ask you about this. Like go up to them in a warm up, or, like don't be afraid to ask, because everybody wants to help. I haven't met anybody who I really respect that won't kind of tell me how they're doing it. Like I think it's an interesting sport because I don't think I wouldn't really know, but I don't think it exists in such a friendly way as it does in our sport. And I think, again, we're kind of all competing against ourselves in a way. But I think everybody's pretty generous with their, understanding of how they see things. So I think that's important, especially when you're young. Like if you have somebody you really look up to and want to know how the heck they're doing what they're doing, like just go talk to them. Like the people that I know won't turn you away, and they're pretty good. So
that's awesome. That's really good advice. I think we have a great sport too for that in general. Well, Alex, it was so great to spend time with you and learn more about you and yours and Ellie's business. And
yeah, thanks for having me. It's great talking to you.
We will be cheering for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jessa.
Yeah, thanks for everything. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too. Bye.
Bye. All right, I clicked stop recording, but Riverside, for whatever reason, keeps us live on YouTube for like 30 seconds. So
Oh, okay.
we have that awkward.
Don't do anything crazy.
Awkward 30 seconds. Yeah, but you were great. Thank you so much. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
No,
Just